Welcome to the Your Message Received podcast. And now, taking your message to the finish line, your host, John Duffin.
Hey folks, John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Welcome back to another episode of Your Message Received. Your Message Received is the home, the place, the platform to help you find your best, most true, authentic business voice. Heck, maybe your best, true, authentic voice, period. Get what you want, find what you need, improve your results, make billions of dollars, meet the person of your dreams. We guarantee most, but not all of that. And as I said, and we're working on guaranteeing those last two. But in the meantime, the reason we continue to feel good about the fact that you show up for us is because we get to bring people on who walk the walk. We are all about authenticity here. And today is no exception. I get to bring an acclaimed public speaker, business expert, business leader, former corporate marketing vice president, who is, as I said, keynote speaker, business humorist. And you might be like, well, what's so funny about business? You will see when we introduce, and happens to live in one of my favorite places in the world, which is Chicago, which just makes me happy. Conor Cunneen, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, John, great to be on the show. And I liked your comment about walking the walk. I've just walked this back road here now. You said I live in Chicago. I actually live
I was going to say Chicago is really surprisingly beautiful. Is that near the Sears Tower?
Just behind there. But I live in Naperville, which is about 30 miles west of Chicago. And I tell people that because Illinois now is a bankrupt state, this is the condition of the road from Naperville into Chicago. So so I'm walking the road at the moment.
It's a beautiful path. So folks, if you're watching us on YouTube, and I hope you are, then you get to see that gorgeous path, which just does my heart good. My heritage is not exclusively, but majority of Irish heritage. And so you hear this beautiful brogue of my guests, and that just makes me happy as well. Hey, Conor, one of the very first things that I think about is this. We're in the time of year, by the time this episode gets published, we'll be in the thick, if you're listening to it, folks, in the year 2024 when we're recording this. Well, the business environment to me, which is where I came from, often is not a field of humor. Whereas a lot of funny things and wonderful things happened to me during my 25 plus year run. But Conor, when you talk about humor as it relates to business, when did you realize that that was an asset?
I suppose I probably realized when it was an asset, when something my boss said to me, Conor, you're a total clown. But actually, that maybe wasn't being positive. So I suppose the way I look at it, John, is that I only appreciated it was an asset, serious asset, once I left the corporate environment and started paying attention to what was important to make teams work better, to get better camaraderie, and to get better motivation. Now, as a marketing leader, that was my job, but you spend so much time just trying to get today's challenge sorted out that you don't spend a lot of time thinking about your team. Although I think I was a reasonably good leader. I do believe I'd be a better leader now, having worked outside the environment for quite some time. That's my thinking anyway. But what I do believe, John, is that humor is a tool. You don't go to work to be funny. You go to work to be professional, to be productive.
Okay.
But one of the ways that you can improve the productivity and your camaraderie and connection with either team workers or with clients or with customers is by just bringing a little bit of humor now and again to your business world. I'm not telling you to be a comedian. You do that, you're going to be out of the corporate world. But use humor as a powerful tool to facilitate your messaging, your type of bonding, and the atmosphere that you create. And I can give you some ideas and thoughts as to how we can make that happen as we go forward in this discussion.
The answer is I'm going to take you up on that, which to me, I'm going to say with an absolute yeah, please. Look, I found in the bio, and to me, one of the most unfunny places that you could ever speak would be San Quentin prison. So I noticed that, and rather than wait, because again, my thought is, it's not that it wouldn't be badly needed there. Humor, I mean, right? I mean, in the midst, but how did you get affiliated to go there in the first place?
Well, I didn't
Inmate
actually.
already, or was that were you a guest? How did it work?
Hey, it was a short sentence, Your Honor. Funny thing though, I was doing an event in Disney a couple of months ago. You know, when you go into the Disney hotels, they now give you the wristbands that open the doors and everything for you.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the young lady behind the receptionist said, here's the electronic wristband. So I said, thank you very much. So I actually, at the other side of the desk, I bent over and started to put it onto my ankle. And I said
Oh
to
my
her,
God.
oh, sorry, that's just out of habit kind of thing. She's still looking at me. But the reference to, I've actually done some work for the food service industry in the correctional facilities. But
Right.
the reference to customer service in San Quentin jail, that was actually the title of the speech I did to win Chicago Humorist Speaker of the Year.
Wow.
So the way that worked, John, is, and I take some of the lines from that at times when I'm doing serious corporate events.
Yeah.
The idea here is that humor, one of the key essence of humor is surprise. So when I was doing, I speak a lot in customer service and I'm improving people, performance and productivity with a smile. So I'm thinking, where are the best places or the worst places to get customer service? And I suppose the DMV regularly pops into people's mind. Although, in fairness, I think they're reasonably okay these days, and God help the poor people.
I mean, they've always treated me okay, but I get what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
There's just a kind of a brand essence about the DMV. But then I was thinking, all right, customer service. I want to do a funny speech on customer service. Where? And I said, San Quentin. Yeah, I mean, the last place you would expect
the last place.
to get it. So what I did was I took some of the essence of customer service ethos in a business sense and brought it over to San Quentin. So I created a mission statement, and I might be doing something like to an organization, a serious point now for a second. I say, all right, gang, you guys have got a good mission statement here. I'll compliment them. But so many other organizations don't have mission statements that make any kind of sense. They're just words. And for example, a mission statement for San Quentin prison might go something like, here in San Quentin, we are dedicated to your security. Your freedom is our number one concern. Right? So that's actually what I said was the mission statement for San Quentin. And I do drop that in sometimes when I'm talking about, it's just verbiage that a lot of organizations have got when they're talking about customer service and about their mission statement, etc. There are words that mean nothing as such. So that's what I try to do. I try to take serious content and reinforce it with some good humor. So then when I was doing the San Quentin one, other lines I used were things like, let's see, what did we use? Oh, yes, the correctional officers are now known as hospitality officers. Okay, except the problem with that is that now the inmates who are guests of the nation are referring to the hospitality officers as hoes. So this is a problem, okay?
You said something a moment ago, which I really liked, which is, because now I get like the link. I just was in another conversation, my God, yesterday, where someone was talking about the often emptiness of vision statements. And literally, like when you just brought that up and using those examples, whether it's free, give me the freedom one again with San Quentin.
Yeah,
freedom is our.
We are dedicated to your security. Your freedom is our number one concern.
So here's what that does. It amplifies the importance to me of so many vision statements or mission statements or whatever they want to call them being just empty words. It to me really does, like, and now I understand the link between humor and amplifying like a narrative, right?
Yeah.
When you were driving business as part of corporate, right? In terms of this, what were some of the things that you felt like you learned when you were a marketing VP that has helped you now? Because you did it for some time, you were able to, as I said, make quite an impression. But what was it like, some of the things, examples that you learned where you realized that there could be either a second life to it, or more importantly, you could help people,
Right.
with your own
I think
style?
one of my key attributes when
Mhm.
I was in corporate was
Right.
that I really did try to understand the target market or the people
Mhm.
that I was speaking to.
Right.
So I think I started in Ireland, then was transferred over to the UK, and
Mhm.
then got transferred to the US. And actually, when I got transferred to the US, John, one of my Irish friends, he spoke to me and he said, "Oh, Conor, I hear now they're sending you over to F up the US market." Okay, so it's good to have friends like that.
I want to hear about the adjustment from the
Yeah.
UK or Ireland, UK to the States for you personally. But that thought is, so why don't you just get to it?
So,
What was that transfer like?
well, I tell you, I can take both of these last two questions together. One of
Yeah.
my real skills, I think, was my ability to try and understand what was going on. So when I was in Ireland and then in
Mhm.
the UK, I
Mhm.
would spend a lot of time out in the road with our sales team. Now, in the
Mhm.
UK, I was primarily marketing, but
Mhm.
it is a really good way to know what the heck is going on.
Yep.
Because the higher up in an organization you get, the more filtered it becomes, and the stuff that is actually excrement down at the bottom is filtered up all the way to being a wonderful fertilizer that'll make everything grow.
That's
Okay?
a beautiful narrative. And yep, exactly. And also very true.
Yeah,
So
true.
you're with the crew, so to speak.
Yeah,
You're on the road,
and that was
right?
quite easy to do in Ireland, relatively easy to do in the UK. But when you come to the US, then it becomes harder to do. So I felt that the further away I was from the market, the more I had to rely then on people telling me the truth down at the ground floor, etc.
Right.
And I think in general, I was getting that, but everyone always filters stuff that goes up to
Mhm.
the boss kind of
Sure.
thing. So that was one of the big challenges or issues that I suppose struggled with a little bit. When I came over here, the company I came over with was Best Foods, Hellman's
Oh,
Mayonnaise,
yep.
North Soups and Sauces, Thomas's English
Yep.
Muffins, etc. And I was dead lucky, John. Our boss at the time, his name was Mike Bevilacqua, and he was a good New York Italian American who made
Mm.
Robert De Niro sound like a choir boy.
Gotcha.
And as an Irishman, that made me feel at home.
That is great.
Yeah.
Um,
So from a
so
personal point of view, the transition wasn't that difficult, but
I
from a
gotcha.
business point of view, there's a big learning curve.
What was it like for you and your family in regards to like just living here? Just moving. I mean, now you're 30 miles outside of Chicago, so it's not like you're like living in the grit of the city, but Chicago's one of the biggest, and to me, one of the coolest places in the United States.
Yeah,
What was the adjustment like for
it's a
you
great.
from a personal level?
The adjustment is much easier for the executive who's transferred rather than the spouse and family. Because I came over here, we came over just a few days before Christmas.
Mhm.
I tell people, John, I've been working on the Chicago accent for about 26 years now. Okay.
Nice.
Nailed it, haven't I?
I think you got it.
Yeah. But we decided to come over just before Christmas because my wife didn't want to be spending time in Ireland and just be getting upset about leaving. So we actually came over earlier.
Mhm.
But on the 2nd of January, I was in the office up at near O'Hare Airport and working with
Okay.
people.
Yep.
Nothing dramatically different in terms of interaction, etc. My
Mhm.
poor wife, I wasn't able to work for a couple of years because she didn't have the visa. My poor darling daughter was 14 years of age, and we dumped her into a Catholic high school halfway through freshman year in
Mm.
when we came over. Like, so I mean, the challenges for them were much greater, I think, than for the executive who got transferred, because I was basically into an environment I was somewhat familiar with, and it was always go, 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 traveling all over the place, etc., almost immediately.
So for your wife and daughter, how were they able, in your mind, to make the adjustment? Because like you said, and rightfully so, they didn't have it anywhere near as easy as the executives coming in. And I also, like, it actually made my heart hurt when you brought up your daughter at the halfway point of a semester. So it's weird, the stuff that resonates, but you said that. How, like, what was the adjustment? How were you able to help? When did you, the better question I think would be, when did things start to get comfortable for them, and how did you know?
I would think things started to, for the first, I mean, my daughter, God love her, she was brilliant, but I mean, she was really missed her friends. She was crying herself to sleep at night at times. But I'll say this much for her, and I said this at our wedding 11 years ago. She got married back in Ireland to, she lives here in the Chicagoland area, but she wanted to get married back in Ireland. And I said to her, and I got just use the phrase I did use, I said, Amy, I cannot thank you enough. You never gave me any shit when I am, even though I dragged you over. But so a 14-year-old is very, very pliable, amenable, I think, can adapt to an environment very fast. Within, I'd say, about 5 months, 6 months, she'd lost a lot of her Irish accent. She's a redheaded colleen. I do remember saying to her, I think there's the year she was in junior year, I said, Amy, for the summer, what you should do is you should try and just get a job as a wait staff somewhere, because with your red hair, and you can, with the Irish accent, you'd be fine. And she looked at me and she said, Dad, the only Irish accent I can put on now is your stupid Irish accent. So.
Stupid, nice. Brilliant. Well, now I know she adjusted, so she's right back like a United States person. Your stupid accent.
And my wife then, I think she basically got involved in some community work after a while, and that made the difference for her. But what she says, though, and I fully agree with it, one of the big differences between Ireland and the US is that there's a lot more laughter in Ireland. You go to a pub, any social scene in Ireland, and people are going to be laughing. Here in the US, people are much more reserved, and they just don't, there isn't as much banter. I think have you been to Ireland a few times, John? Or have you?
I'm embarrassed to tell you, no, I have not yet. I'm actually looking at dual citizenship, but it would probably be nice if I actually showed up and actually lived it. It is bucket list item for me.
Yeah. Well, what I say to anyone, and this is obviously through rose-tinted glasses to an extent, but I think anyone who goes over to Ireland, any American, say it is the most welcoming, cheerful, and happy country for visitors. I'm not saying that there isn't a whole lot of problems over there, and people don't fight and don't get on, etc. But if you're a visitor there, you're just treated like royalty, and the fun, and as I said, Ireland, I tell my audiences, John, that Ireland has got the best crack in the world.
And that is?
And people kind of go, what? Did he say crack?
Right.
And he doesn't look like a crackhead. I said, in Ireland, the word for fun is crack. So quite literally, I was over there now a few months ago, and I kind of kept track of the number of times. If I met a friend, the question is, Conor, how's the crack? Or what's the crack, kind of thing. So, as I tell my American audiences when I'm doing some programs, I tell them that you quite likely in Ireland, you'll hear Sister Mary Margaret say, oh, you won't believe the amount of crack we had down at Father Murphy's house last night. So
used as a noun and a verb. It is a great thing to know. I'm embarrassed. A second thing, I'm embarrassed. I didn't realize that was the translation, and I've heard the expression a lot. So you just helped me there too. So
no, it's actually spelt a little bit different. It's C-R-A-I-C, but the pronunciation is crack.
It's exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
Now I fully know. So the observation is from your family is that and from you is that it is much more reserved here. When were you able to, like, for them or for you, utilize the humor card to, in essence, bridge the sort of reserve, first within a personal level, and then we'll bring it back to the business in a moment. But from a personal side, obviously your daughter has adapted, and your wife, because like I said, she's married and living here. So
Yeah.
when did you see their ability to be able to, whether it is accept the humor or bring some of their own to a much more reserved audience?
I think it happens when you start developing friendships.
Okay.
In Ireland and also in the UK, there's a lot of banter between the friends and colleagues. And you say some things at a business meeting, maybe just a work colleague, that Americans would kind of say, my God, I can't believe you said that, kind of thing. But it's banter in Ireland, and no one gets offended at it, and someone will say something back to you. And similar with the UK in general. Here in the States, I found that I had to, well, the first thing I had to do was I just be careful about how often I was using the F-bomb.
Yep.
And because it's, people told me I was using a lot of profanity, and I was thinking, what profanity? I just dropped the F-bomb. That's not profanity in Ireland. That's a noun. It's a verb. It's an adjective. It's an adverb. It's the expression of delight.
Right.
So, but here it's obviously different. But as you get to build friendships, then your natural self comes out, and you can add the humor, and they get the humor that we have, the comments and the quips, etc., that you will be able to throw to people in Ireland. But I do appreciate, though, that as a keynote speaker and as a business presenter, I've got to be very careful about what I say and do. I mean, I never use any profanity on stage ever. I never use any kind of thing, anything that's off color. So I've got to be very careful on that. But when you're with friends, you can obviously be more natural.
Obviously, and that's the authenticity part. So you're now over, the family's over, you're building a career and building a life. And so when did you start to think, if I just inject some well-timed humor here, I can either diffuse a volatile situation, or I can uplift, whether it was a client before we're at the stages of being on stages, like in the sense of when, because I would imagine there was sort of like maybe trial and error, maybe not, maybe it went perfectly from the beginning, but walk me through the mechanics of how this started to build this persona of the Irishman Speaks.
Right. Well, I think it's the Irishman Speaks. I left Unilever after about 4 or 5 years here in the States. Went into some consulting initially about the food service market.
Right.
Was asked to speak at events, and over a period of a couple of years, I developed the Irishman Speaks mantra and the branding. So I do tell people that it's really difficult for you to come up with an overnight brand or overnight positioning statement, etc. So don't beat yourself up if that doesn't happen overnight. But when I was in the corporate side, if I was doing a sales or marketing presentations, especially at sales conferences and things like that, I was always a pretty good talker, which I think is different to being a good speaker.
Correct.
Okay? But I think I was a relatively good speaker as well. But what I did find that when I was talking or speaking to the sales force, they would often kind of come back to me later on and say, "Hey, Conor, that was very funny. I really appreciated your presentation, etc." And there was a great crack in the presentation.
There you go. Right? There you go. Right?
So, but that was happening almost naturally. But what it helped me to realize, though, was that, hey, these people are saying positive things about the presentation. They're also saying positive things about my style. And what I do believe, John, when I'm talking about adding humor to your presentation, the idea is you've got to be professional. You've got to have a good message. You've got to have a good content. And one of the ways to facilitate getting your message across to people is by dropping humor in now and again. You're
Mhm.
not on stage to be a comic. You're on stage to sell the product or to sell
Mhm.
your idea or your
Yeah.
concept. And humor is a grease that will help you to get that concept across.
Could you give me an example of an instance where you used humor, hello. You used humor and it really worked. And then I'd also ask you, can you give me an example where you tried, whether it was early on and it didn't work? The question's the same for both. And then what did you do? Whether it's on a stage or on a board meeting or whatever. An example where it really worked and you felt it, and an example where it didn't work and you had to rebound.
Right. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. One from my corporate days,
Yeah.
and one from just when I'm as a keynote speaker. I do remember that when we were in the food service area, you were looking at
Mhm.
trying to provide convenient meals and solutions for the food service industry.
Right.
And I remember my boss, Mike Bevilacqua, saying on one occasion, what we need is a one-stop food solution. And I said, Mike, we've already got that. And he looked at me and said, what are you talking about? I said, it's Guinness. Okay, so I do remember the reaction I got to that. Wasn't very helpful in solving his problem, but
But it certainly broke the ice.
it
No
broke
pun intended. Yeah.
it broke the ice. Yeah. Now the other thing then I do is when I'm speaking to associations and corporations, I've had two bouts of cancer over the years, John. So that the silver lining there is that it's opened doors for me for the healthcare sector and for oncology in particular. And my favorite audience speaking to is oncology nurses and oncology professionals, because
Why?
the oncology fraternity or confraternity, sisterhood, whatever way you want to call it, they see so much pain. They see a lot of death. There's a lot of stress in it. So when they come to one of my presentations or when I'm speaking to them, I want to improve their people, their performance, and their productivity. But I want to do it with a smile. And what I said too, I remember this happened a couple of years ago when I was presenting to a large conference here in Chicago. This came up. The line came up just by accident. I told people that I've had two cancers. Okay, prostate and thyroid. So when I'm pitching actually for a piece of business, John, I'll say to the event planner, actually both of those were whipped out, the prostate and the thyroid. So as a result of that, I now have an Irish connection. Having had a prostatectomy and a thyroidectomy, I now have an Irish connection known as there's not much left of me. Okay, so I do say that for event planners when I'm speaking to them, and it helps to get a seal the business. I also say that when I'm talking to my audience. But then I was telling them that when I went for my prostate initial examination, I had a prostate biopsy, and I used two lines there. I said one is primarily ladies in the audience, nurses. I said one thing I have learned is that doctors lie. When they say this won't hurt, you know they're lying, okay? But then I spur the moment, I said, ladies, let me give you a piece of advice. Never have a prostate biopsy. The place just cracked up laughing, okay? So
I love it. I don't want to gloss over that because that you say, and obviously you say it well, which, I've had two cancers, and I would say two invasive ones, prostate and thyroid. What got you through? And because you got through twice, and often, not often, sometimes people don't get through once, but you got through twice. How
yeah.
did you get through?
I think I'm blessed, John, in a couple of areas. One is I've been blessed with a really good family. My darling wife is still living with me, God help her. My sister-in-law, who lives in New York, says my wife will be canonized the minute she dies, having put up with me. But so her support and the support of my kids really helped. The other thing is that I am really lucky in that while I do work on it, I have a very positive attitude.
Okay.
That's just ingrained in me. And I knew I was going to beat this. Now, in general, the odds for thyroid and prostate are very good. There's about 30,000 men die from prostate cancer each year in the United States. But if you catch it early, your chances are very, very good. But the way it actually worked, though, was that because I'm such an optimist, and my wife wouldn't be as big an optimist, what used to happen was that I was able to sleep at night while we were going through the prostate treatment. My wife was having sleepless nights. And what that kind of made me really appreciate, and it's something I say to my oncology audiences and survivorship audiences, that the person who's going through the treatment is suffering physical pain and emotional trauma. The caregivers suffering emotional trauma and emotional pain, and not enough thought is given to how they are going through the journey, because sometimes for them the journey can be worse. It was worse for my wife because I knew I was going to beat it. She didn't know I was going to beat it. So that's something I really do try to get across to all audiences, that the caregiver goes through as much angst as the patient quite a lot of the time.
Do you think it's possible? Because there's a softness to what you just said in terms of, especially in appreciation of the caregivers, and knowing some caregivers quite closely in my world. I think it's not just that how important caregivers are, but it's also when people realize how important they are. Do you think that has helped you as not just recover, but in a business sense? Because I also believe there was such a sound of appreciation in your voice when you said that. Does that help you in a sense of realizing that there's vulnerability across the board? Because I would think that as opposed to you sounding bitter or taking things for granted, you sound like none of those things. And so does that realization help you in a business sense?
I think it does. I mean, I appreciate how lucky I am. I mean, I regularly, so I've taken up playing golf in the last year and a half. And well, what I do is I carry pull a bag around the field really rather than play golf, is what I would think it is I'm doing. But regularly when I'm out there, I'm just saying, Conor, this is brilliant. Appreciate it. You're so lucky to be able to do this, because I have a lot of friends who can't do it or have passed away, but just aren't healthy enough to do it. So I really do appreciate that. And I think what I also say to my audience is, no matter who they are, every single person in the audience, you shouldn't, I have a colleague who says you should never say every, but every single person in the audience has gone through the same emotions as the person next to them. What has generated those emotions might be different experiences, but we've all had the same pain, anger, frustration, good days, bad days, happy days, sad days, etc. And if you can appreciate that, you can craft your message to be able to connect with them. The story I tell might not be the same story as Mary Lou or as Billy down in row 17 kind of thing, but the emotion is something that they can understand and appreciate and connect with.
That helps me. And it also, I think about too, that as you just said, everybody has either walked the walk or taken, or, has been on some sort of a journey. I had the misconception a while back, before I got lucky enough to be connected with you, that I would look at humor as comedians and jokesters, and in business settings, like see examples where it was either badly received or really unappreciated, because the people that were on the other side of it were thinking they don't understand how important or how stressful or how demanding and all that sort of thing is. How do you cut through the clutter when you are speaking? Let's say now take you to a stage of where people know what they're, in essence, they know what they're getting. I mean, obviously, right? They can read your bio or watch your videos. But what I would say is, let me try it a different way. I'm cutting myself off. So in a sales or corporate setting first, before the stage, how are you able to cut through what I'm going to call either the self-importance stress from the other side, or that sense of having your guard or walls up? How are you able to cut through it?
Well, I think the way I cut through it initially, John, is by coming across as being a person with good content.
Right.
And I mean, to be honest with you, the brogue does help. I understand that. And
It does. And I
it
love
does,
it.
yeah. Yeah. And so that does help me a little bit. Often when I actually come on stage, I'll say to people that my homeland, Ireland, is a wonderful welcoming place, but it's also a country full of different cultures and
Sure.
ethnicities now. So quite likely your speaker, instead of starting off with something like top of the morning, might just as likely come up with something like, what's up? Okay. So that always gets a laugh. But then I said, what we're going to talk about today to all of you here in the audience is we're going to talk about my core keynote that I can adapt for any group is around the gift of gab.
Yeah.
So the what's up is the gift of gab: goals, attitude, behavior. And my promise to you is that if at the end of the day you adopt and adapt what we're going to learn today about goals, attitude, and behavior, it will help you to create a better work environment, or it will help you to create better sales or a better marketing share, whatever it is we're being brought in for. So that's the kind of the way I bring the material in serious points in general, reinforced by some humor. So I'll give you a simple little example. I speak, my mission, and not like the San Quentin one, but my mission is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile.
I'm loving, by the way, that mantra of a little bit of BS. I love that sense. And thank you to save me a question. So yeah, please go on.
Okay, but actually what I do say, the BS reference there is I use the line sometimes that I leave my audience with a smile on the face. What I say is, what was the BS line again?
The business strategies, business solutions.
It's a combination of business strategy, business solutions, and BS.
Yeah.
But the BS gang can be brand strategy, business solutions, business strategy, or brilliant stories, or a little bit of BS. Okay, so that's the kind of way I go. But what I do is I try to provide a serious message and then use humor to reinforce it. So the humor is always a reinforcer, and it connects better with the audience. So an example I would give you would be, if my mission is to improve people, performance, and productivity with a smile, which a lot of organizations want, obviously. I speak a lot to manufacturing, to food industry, to safety conferences. Okay, so let's assume that your manufacturing audience here, and safety is important in your environment. I'm now telling you that your goal, and one of the goals would be that I want you to come into work with 10 fingers and toes and leave with 10 fingers and toes.
Reasonable expectation.
Reasonable explanation, yes. That's not my definition. I heard it some years ago somewhere. So, but for that, so let's assume we know, John, I'm talking to you. You're the safety audience, the manufacturing audience. So for you to be able to leave with 10 fingers and toes, you've got to be aware of your environment. And if you're not aware of your environment, you're going to end up in trouble. Let me just illustrate this with a quick little anecdote. A couple of months ago, my wife and I went to collect our darling granddaughter from soccer practice. Maggie is a 6-year-old red-headed little darling. Nice. We put Maggie into the back seat of the car, and my wife sat into the back seat of the car with Maggie, who was now strapped in, obviously. I then sit into the back seat of the car, and after a couple of seconds, Maggie goes, "Grampy, you should be driving the car." And I said, "Oh, I want to sit here." And she says, "Grampy," as only a 6-year-old granddaughter could do, "drive the car." So I said, okay, I'll drive the car.
Mhm.
I get out of the car. We have a problem. We're on child lock,
Oh,
which means we're on Grampy lock. Okay. So what I've got to do here is I've got to phone my daughter, who'd left about 5 minutes previously, who comes back into the parking lot. And I realized I had a piece of nice little humor I could use when I saw her coming towards us, and she was breaking her sides laughing.
mhm.
But then the point about that story for you as a safety audience, gang, is that I got into a slight little bit of trouble because I wasn't aware of my surroundings. For you in the manufacturing environment, where you have some dangerous areas, you need to be aware of your surroundings.
Mhm.
And then I'll ask a question of the audience, John. I'll say something like, how many people here have got kids right now who are 1 to 4 years old? So a few hands will go. So you've got that car seat in the back of the car, yeah?
Mhm.
Right. The next time you're strapping your kid into that car seat, say to yourself, what are the equivalent of child locks in my industry that if I don't pay attention to, and if my team don't pay attention to, we're going to get into trouble? For those of you who don't have kids, but quite likely tomorrow, when you're at the traffic lights, you might look over and see a Honda Odyssey or something like that with the kid strapped into the back and say to yourself, that Irish guy got me thinking about the child locks.
Mm.
What is it that we need to make sure we get right and make sure my colleagues get right so we are able to leave with 10 fingers and 10 toes?
I think what I like so much about that is, aside from the obvious, the humor and the levity and all that. So, I mean, aside from that, but then I would go that you would have to be able to, I would think, get people to participate more. So memorization is difficult. Like,
Yeah,
remember this on page 47 of the manual, and here's the safety guide, and on page 952.
yeah,
But if you can engage somebody where they can literally, as you said, oh, all right, the next time you're pulling up, what would be the safety provisions? And in their mind, you start to automatically like, oh, right,
yeah,
don't forget, boom, 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 boom. And
yeah,
so I would think that one of the best ways that I've learned from my own experience to facilitate learning is engagement, is not drilling or giving speeches. That to me would be a really powerful way to get engagement. And so I really love that example. Another thing that I'm learning from you too, which is you're obviously, the way that you speak, you lean into culture, but you demonstrate your ability to be really inclusive. And so how are you able to weave through the part where you're able to get everyone? Because rather than I tell a bunch of Irish jokes, you don't. You tell a lot of funny examples.
yeah.
How are you able to bring what I would say is all cultures, all in? How are you able to weave it in so that it works for mass audiences?
Right. Well, if you raise a point there about jokes, I really do not tell jokes at all, because
Oh, man.
my basic thesis on
Mhm.
adding humor to your presentation, John, is that you don't have to be funny
Mhm.
to be funny. And what did he say? I said you don't have to be funny. Funny. Okay. All right. So I'm talking to my invisible friend over here, John, all
No,
the time.
I was gonna
Okay.
say they seem quite charming.
Right.
All right.
But the basic idea is that if you can capture the humor around you, something that
Mhm.
made you laugh last week, pop it into your iPhone notes. You don't know when you're going to use it, but sometime, somewhere you might use it.
Mhm.
If you can capture something that you said that put a smile on your colleague's face around the coffee table or
Mhm.
the water cooler, pop it into your notes. You don't know when you're going to use it, but
Mhm.
you might be able to use it sometime. So what I try to do is I capture a lot of that information. Now, I do create a fair amount of humor, I think, because I'm just lucky with that, but I work on doing it.
Mhm.
But I really do work very hard on capturing the humor that I see around me. So I then try to take that humor and say, all right, how can I customize it? So I'll give an example. The best example I can come up with is uh, I was doing an event in Hartford, Connecticut a couple of years ago. It was actually
Right.
when Tom Brady was still playing with the Patriots, okay?
Yeah.
And my signature story about in goals, attitude, and behavior is one around attitude, about choosing your attitude. So I tell a story about when I was looked in my rear view mirror and I see behind me a mobile discotheque. What? Mobile discotheque, cop car, flashing lights. Okay. So I pull in and I'm telling my Hartford, Connecticut audience, I see the cop get out of the car and I see him walking up towards me. And this guy was really ugly, really ugly. He reminded me of Tom Brady. Okay. Did I get booed by the audience? Absolutely. But in a good manner.
You want the engagement. So,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
that's what it was. Yeah, yeah. So when I get booed in a good natured way by the audience, I know we're connecting really, really. So what I try to do, John, is that wherever I'm doing an event or whatever association I'm doing an event for, let's say I was doing something in Seattle a couple of weeks ago, Olympia, Washington. I would have checked to see Olympia, Washington, Irish. Just Google that. And of course, the first thing that comes up is the Irish pub in Olympia, Washington. But I go further than that. I want to know any Irish history related to Olympia. Or if I'm in San Francisco or San Diego, any Irish history related to those.
Sure.
I can then kind of make some reference to the fact that, hey, I'm not the first Irishman to be here in front of an audience. In 1845, they came across the plains kind of thing, and a little bit of a story there. So I use those kind of research techniques to make sure I customize an already, I believe, very good message around goals, attitude, and behavior, but make sure it resonates with my particular audience.
So do you think, I love the way that you're able to, I never say this word right, I'm embarrassed, systemically, I think is the way I want to say it, break down the actual, like the ability to do it. I think it's brilliant that you're able to literally break down the techniques, right? Do you think humor is teachable, or do you think it's either you got it or you don't?
Oh, I think it's teachable, and that's what I'm basically saying with my presentation here on adding humor to your presentation. I think a couple of things about this, John. One is that when we smile, we feel better. When you make other people smile, you feel better. And there's a basic neurological reason for that. Some of the feel-good chemicals are released, like dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, etc., serotonin, those kind of things are released, which are designed to make us feel good. So if I, as a speaker, can make people feel good to good stories, but a little bit of humor, I'm going to connect better with them. If you, as a presenter or as a salesperson going into a call, can just get those endorphins or serotonins just agitated in the other person's brain, you're going to connect better. So the first thing I try to get across to my audience is, do we agree that if we can get your client or our audience laughing or smiling, doesn't have to be laughing, smiling, we're in a better environment. General agreement on that. Yes. Okay. So for salespeople, I'll say, all right, you have gone through every sales program in the book. You've been told how to close, you've been told how to open, how to do your research. And there's very little new. What I'm saying to you is that if you're dealing with a client and you can get them smiling once or twice during the presentation with a piece of material that properly reinforces one of your key points, you're going to connect better with that client. So we've got them. You believe in the power of humor. You believe that if your client is smiling, things can get better. So here's what you got to do, gang. You got to say, all right, I buy into this concept. I'm going to do something about it. And then you're saying, but I'm not funny. And I respond back, you don't have to be funny to be funny. I would bet that as you as a salesperson in the last week, when you were dealing with customers or clients, said a few things, a few quips that put smiles on their faces. It's quite likely that that quip or comment can be used next week when you go into a different client.
Oh my God. You don't know how, like, look, I at the risk of sounding self-serving, I'm bringing it up because that actually happened to me. So the first time I spoke to I was asked to speak to an audience at a real estate related event.
Yeah.
never had a paid opportunity where I was asked to speak. I've given a million sales presentations, but I never counted that. I never counted that as experience for some reason. And I remember being asked it, and I only bring that up because I immediately put my guard up and said to the person, I don't tell jokes. And so when you said that, it just did my heart good. I am a massive believer in what you just said. By the way, you just demonstrated the mark of someone who is really generous, because that to me is very kind that you made that so. I believe you, which is you do not have to be I think the technique that I will take away from you, which I think is wonderful, is just literally the observations that you've got, like in a series of notes, that you may not use it today, maybe you'll use it next week, maybe you'll use it someday, or as you just said, if it resonated and brought a smile, which takes the pressure off of needing to feel like you've got to have hysterical guffaws. You just need to make somebody smile. The chances are good it will probably work again next week. And honest to God, Conor, I just think that part to me is generous, helpful, and adds value. One more question for the moment. You just brought up Seattle, and a buddy of mine who happens to live bi-coastal, Seattle and Philadelphia, just happened to have attended, it was 2 nights ago in Seattle, Metallica. So you're a big old fan, right? So have you seen them perform live? I know you like to listen to them loud. Have you ever seen them before?
I have. I've seen them twice. Actually, I was at Megadeth last night in Chicago. No, I gotta be honest with you, they didn't do a whole lot for me, but I've seen Metallica a couple of times live. But what I love, John, is seeing their concerts on YouTube. They've got the most fantastic concerts, 2-hour-plus concerts on YouTube. Some of them are official Metallica releases, but the amount of people now who are bringing out concerts with multicams that are
first-rate videos. I mean,
mind-bogglingly good.
Exactly.
So I love when I'm here in my office. I've got the television in the other room. So if my wife isn't around the place, I'll blast on one of the YouTube Metallica concerts and I just go rocking. And what I like about it, and I say this to my audiences when I'm speaking to people who want to connect with their audience or who want to become professional speakers, a good speech should be like a good concert.
How so?
The master of a good concert, I think, is Bruce Springsteen. He's my favorite of them all.
Just was in Philadelphia last week.
Did you see him?
Not this time. I've seen Bruce about, I think, 4 times.
I actually saw him in Cork last May.
I remember that.
But what he has got, though, he's got the ability to raise you up, make you feel good. Then he'll come over with another song that kind of brings it down a little bit more. It might be a little bit, there might be a story behind. There was a story behind most of his songs, but he kind of is able to play the audience almost like a puppet on puppet strings. And what he's doing, and good concerts do this, they change the tempo and the rhythm of the concert the whole time. It's not just bang, 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 bang. That was Megadeth last night. The switch kind of let me just, it's the same kind of tone, tempo the whole time. But the likes of Metallica and Springsteen in particular, they just change the tone, the tempo. And so you're getting a different reaction from the audience from time to time. And that's what I think is important. If you're a salesperson or you're trying to make a presentation to an audience, do vary your tone, your timing, your pacing, the level of stories, serious point, humor, serious point, humor, that kind of thing.
I just thank you, because it's to me, it's the ability to navigate genuine emotion. That's why I brought that up. Which is you can facilitate, if it's done right, you can facilitate genuine emotion in a number of ways, humor and/or music and/or speed, tempo, what have you. That sort of that galvanization and pure emotion, and based upon your experience, you get to do that. And I'm really honored that you're showing up for me. I have one more question for the moment, which is this. how would you define authenticity? More, whether it's in you or how you see it in others. What makes somebody authentic in your eyes?
Do you know what, John? Authentic is one of the most overused words in the whole world. I really do believe that. I mean, authentic, I think, is just basically being yourself. And I do think that the Conor Cunneen Irishman speaks that people see down the street or on stage is basically the same person. Now, when I'm driving a car in rush hour traffic in Chicago, I might be a different person, and I might sometimes have an arthritic finger, but we won't go into that conversation too much. But in general, though, what I find is that I just try to tell honest stories about my emotions and the emotions that I've gone through. I've got the ability, I think, to be able to weave a little bit of humor through that, but I'm able to connect with people. But I mean, what gets me about the word authentic is one of the great mantras in the speaking business is be authentic. Now, I know numerous speakers who come across on stage as being wonderful and being very affable, etc., and they treat the event planner, not the event planner because that's dangerous, but they treat the janitorial, custodial staff, everyone else, like crap.
Sure.
So, but they'll go on stage and they talk about being authentic. So I always dubious when someone says be yourself or be authentic, because if you some of the speakers, people I know, were be authentic and themselves, they'd never get a gig again, kind of thing.
But you identified, to me, you identified it, and I loved it, which is it's the ability to speak to everyone uniformly. It doesn't mean you have to use the exact same words. It doesn't mean you have to tell the exact same stories, but it's the ability to have that uniform sense of either goodness or service or trying to help somebody, and you use it across the board. That to me is the mark of who I gravitate to. You know, is true, and I seek it because it took me a really long time in my life to feel confident enough to be true to myself. It took me a really long time. So I admire those that are able to do it, because I think it's also a very brave thing to do. So Conor Cunneen, I am honored out of my mind. I acknowledge you for not only walking us down that beautiful road, but also too the sense of demonstrating not just that it's true and right to be able to trust yourself, to incorporate humor, but also that others can do it too. And that means a lot to me. I will have your website up where you've got also your social media profiles and all that sort of thing, because people should find you and need to keep doing that as well too. Conor Cunneen, thank you so much for showing up for me today, man. It's
been a pleasure, John. I really did enjoy it. Take care and get over to Ireland and see what the real roads look like over there, okay?
I have to. Thank you for that reminder, sir. Absolutely. Hey, folks, you've just heard another episode of Your Message Received. Thanks for showing us today and walking the walk with us, because we get to bring great, good people like Conor Cunneen live and in person. Folks, keep watching, listening, liking, being true, and we will keep driving content through your front door. John Duffin here with Duffin Media. Have a great rest of the day, and we will see you soon. Bye.
And now, making its way across the finish line, Your Message Received has been a production of Duffin Media.